They scream so Daddy won't forget us. That's what Alice Wilson whispered at 2 a.m., curled in Mary Quinn's lap after 19 hours of psychological warfare. But by then, 17 nannies had already failed, fled, or been carried out unconscious. And the 24-hour clock was still ticking. But let's rewind to the beginning, to the moment Quinns realized she'd just walked into a nightmare. Daddy fires nannies who cry. Those 5 words would echo in Mary Quinn's mind for the next 24 hours, if she even lasted that long. The penthouse door swung open to pure chaos. Anne and Alice Wilson were already screaming. Not crying, screaming. The kind of sound that clawed its way under your skin and lived there. One twin stood on top of a $50,000 Italian leather couch, ripping a pillow apart with her bare hands. Feathers exploded into the air like snow. The other hurled a crystal paperweight across the room. It shattered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, 6 inches from Quinn's head. The city sprawled below them, cold and glittering and impossibly far away. 70 stories up. No escape. Quinn's clutched her chest, breath coming in shallow gasps. Her hands trembled, not just from fear of the twins, but from what failure meant. Eviction in 3 days. Her son waiting with a neighbor. The utility shut off notice. The empty checking account. The agency woman's whispered warning before hanging up. No one has ever lasted the night. Behind her, barely visible in the shadow of the doorway, Heriberto Wilson stood in perfect stillness. Arms crossed. Expression unreadable. A man who commanded fear across 3 states, reduced to watching 2 small girls destroy everything he owned. He didn't yell. He didn't intervene. He was watching to see how long she would last. A security guard stepped forward, hand on his radio, ready to escort her out the way he'd escorted out all the others. Quinn saw it in his eyes. The same pitying look undertakers gave at her mother's funeral. You're already done. You just don't know it yet. Have you ever been tested before you even spoke a word? If this story makes your heart race, show us some love with a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances and unexpected heroes. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us hope can come from the darkest places. Inside the penthouse, Wilson checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. He had done this 17 times before. 17 nannies. 17 failures. Some lasted 6 hours. One made it to midnight before locking herself in the bathroom, sobbing into her phone. Another fled without her coat, leaving it draped over a chair like a white flag of surrender. The pattern was always the same. Confidence at the door, confusion within the first hour, breakdown by nightfall. The system always worked. Money couldn't buy loyalty, but fear could measure it. Sir, the head of security, Marcus, spoke through the hidden earpiece. Should I initiate early termination protocol? She's already showing signs of. No. Wilson's voice was quiet but absolute. Let her try. From his position in the hallway, he watched Quinns take 3 steps into the war zone that was his daughter's playroom, and had moved on from the pillow to a tower of blocks, sending them flying across the marble floor. Alice screamed something incomprehensible, her face red, hair wild. And Quinns did something no one had ever done before. She lowered herself to the floor. Not kneeling. Not begging. Just sitting. Cross-legged on the cold marble, surrounded by destruction. Breathing hard. Wilson's eyes narrowed. This wasn't in the script. You're supposed to yell at us, and said, stopping mid-tantrum. Her voice was sharp, testing. Quinns said nothing. She pressed her palms flat against the floor, focusing on the coolness of the stone, the solidness of something that wouldn't move. Alice picked up a doll and hurled it. It bounced off Quinn's shoulder. Still, she didn't react. Daddy fires nannies who cry, Alice announced, moving closer. Nanny Sophia cried. Nanny Rosa cried. Nanny Catherine cried and said bad words. I know, Quinns whispered, finally meeting the girl's eyes. I heard. And Alice exchanged a look. Something flickered between them, a silent communication refined by years of isolation. Are you going to cry? And demanded, inches from Quinn's face now. Quinn's hand shook. Her throat tightened. Behind the girls, through the reflection in the window, she could see Wilson watching. Cameras everywhere. Guards positioned at every exit. Locked doors. No clocks. No phone. This wasn't childcare. This was psychological warfare. And she had just walked into a battlefield armed with nothing but desperation. I don't know yet, Quinn said quietly, honestly. Maybe. Would that be okay? The twins froze. No adult had ever asked them for permission to be weak. From his surveillance room, Wilson leaned forward. On 12 different screens, 12 different angles showed the same scene. His daughters motionless, staring at the woman on the floor. Marcus stood beside him. Sir, this is unusual. It's hour 1, Wilson said flatly. They all do something unusual in hour 1. By hour 6, they break. By midnight. She's different, Marcus interrupted, then immediately regretted it. You didn't interrupt Heriberto Wilson. But Wilson didn't respond. He was watching and crouched down, watching Alice take a step closer, watching his daughters, for the first time in months, hesitate. Most nannies last 6 hours, Wilson said finally, his voice like gravel. Let's see if desperation buys her 8. He turned from the screens, but not before catching one last image. Quinn's still sitting on the floor, blood trickling from where she'd bitten her lip to keep from screaming. And his daughters still standing there. Not attacking. Not retreating. Just watching. This wasn't a job interview. This was a sentence. And Mary Quinns had 24 hours to survive it. But survival had never been Mary Quinn's problem. Giving up was. 3 weeks ago, she had been someone else entirely. A woman with a steady job, a modest apartment in Queens, and hope. Then the layoffs came. Then the medical bills from her son's emergency room visit. Then the eviction notice taped to her door like a scarlet letter, giving her 72 hours to vacate. With no family left, her mother dead, her ex-husband vanished, and her 7-year-old son Tommy asking why they were eating cereal for dinner again, Quinns had done what the desperate always do. She made a deal with the devil. The Wilson twins were legendary. Not just in Manhattan's elite nanny networks, but in whispered conversations at employment agencies, in panicked late-night calls between childcare professionals, in deleted social media posts that disappeared within hours of going viral. "They're not children," one former nanny had posted before scrubbing her entire online presence. "They're a test designed by a sociopath. And no one passes." The stories were biblical in their horror. Nanny number 3 walked out after 4 hours, mascara-streaked and trembling, refusing to explain what happened. Nanny number 7 lasted until 3 a.m. before suffering what the official report called an acute stress episode. Nanny number 12 simply vanished. One moment she was there, the next her belongings were packed and she was gone, leaving behind only a note that read, "I can't. I'm sorry." But it was Nanny number 14's TikTok, posted at 11:47 p.m. and deleted by 11:52, that sealed the twins' reputation. "Those girls aren't possessed," she had sobbed into the camera, makeup smeared, hands shaking. "They're weaponized. And their father is the one who made them that way." And Alice Wilson, 5 years old. Identical in appearance. Identical in the damage they could inflict. And Heriberto Wilson, their father, was a man whose name alone could empty rooms, end careers, or worse. A legitimate real estate mogul on paper. A shadow emperor of New York's underworld in reality. A man who controlled territories, loyalties, and lives with the same casual efficiency most people use to order coffee. He didn't need a nanny. He needed someone who could withstand interrogation. When the prestige childcare agency called Quinns for the interview, the woman's voice had been pitched somewhere between sympathy and warning. "Mrs. Quinns, I'm obligated to inform you that this position has a high turnover rate. The compensation is $10,000 for 24 hours, plus a $50,000 bonus if you complete the full period. But I need you to understand." "I'll take it," Quinns had interrupted, "because $60,000 would solve everything. The eviction, the debt, Tommy's school expenses, a chance to breathe." What she didn't know then was that the Wilson penthouse wasn't just a job. It was a crucible. And she had just stepped into the fire. Hour 1, 6:47 p.m. The screaming didn't stop. That was the first thing Quinns learned about Ann and Alice Wilson. They had stamina. Most children tired themselves out after a few minutes of tantrum. These two had been at it since the door opened, and their volume hadn't dropped a single decibel. "You're ugly," and shrieked, standing on the arm of the demolished couch like a general surveying a battlefield. "All the nannies are ugly. That's why Mommy left." Alice threw another object, this time a hardcover book that sailed past Quinn's head with enough force to dent the wall. "She's uglier than Nanny Rosa." And Nanny Rosa looked like a foot. The insults would have been almost funny if Quinn's heart wasn't hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Breathe. Just breathe. But breathing was difficult when every instinct screamed at her to run. The penthouse was designed to overwhelm. 30-foot ceilings, walls of glass showcasing Manhattan's glittering skyline, furniture that cost more than Quinn's had earned in her entire life. The space was so open it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong step and you'd fall forever. And in the center of all that expensive emptiness, two small girls had created absolute chaos. Quinns counted the damage. Shredded pillows, shattered crystal, toppled furniture, toys scattered like shrapnel. A painting, something abstract and probably priceless, hung crooked on the wall, a cracked spider webbing across its surface. How long had they been doing this before I arrived? Sit down or leave, Alice commanded, her voice hitting a pitch that made Quinn's teeth ache. Those are the only choices. Behind Quinn's, still framed in the doorway like a portrait of controlled menace, Heriberto Wilson hadn't moved. His suit was immaculate. Charcoal gray, probably Italian, definitely more expensive than Quinn's car had been before it was repossessed. His face showed nothing. No frustration. No embarrassment. No emotion at all. He was watching this like a scientist observing a petri dish, or an executioner waiting for the condemned to break. The guard's radio crackled. Marcus to base. Nanny arrival. T-0. Status check requested. Another voice responded through the static. Initiate standard observation protocol. Timeline starts now. 6:47 p.m. Timeline. The words slithered through Quinn's mind like ice water. They were timing this. Recording it. This was data collection. You gonna stand there all night? And had stopped screaming. Her voice was suddenly calm, conversational even. The shift was more unnerving than the chaos. Or you gonna do something? Quinn's mouth was dry. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. I'm here to help. Help. Alice exploded back into volume. Nanny Catherine said that. Nanny Sophia said that. They all say that. And then they leave, and finished quietly. They always leave. For just a moment, one fractured second, Quinn saw something beneath the chaos. Something that looked almost like hope. No, not hope. Hunger. These children were starving for something Quinn's couldn't quite name. In Quinn's pocket, her phone buzzed. The guard, Marcus, stepped forward immediately. Phones are surrendered during the evaluation period. It's probably my son. Phones are surrendered during the evaluation period, Marcus repeated, his hand extended. Not a request. A command. Quinn's pulled out her phone. The screen showed a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Tommy asking when you're coming home. I told him you're at work. He won't eat his dinner. Her fingers trembled as she handed the phone to Marcus. The last connection to the outside world gone. You'll get it back after the evaluation, Marcus said, which was the first time anyone had actually confirmed there would be an after. If you survive that long, his expression added silently. Wilson finally moved. Just his head, turning slightly toward Marcus. Time check. 6 minutes elapsed, sir. Wilson's eyes returned to Quinn's. You're doing better than Nanny number 11. She was crying by minute 4. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. Clinical. Detached. He was betting on when she'd break, not if. And picked up a vase. Not just any vase. This one was clearly Ming Dynasty or something equally irreplaceable. She held it over her head, arms shaking with the weight of it. "I'm going to drop it," she announced. 3, 2. Every adult in the room tensed. The guard's hand moved toward his radio. Wilson's expression remained unchanged, but Quinn's noticed his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. This was a test within a test. Stop the child and fail for being too controlling. Let her drop it and fail for being negligent. There was no right answer, only different types of failure. Quinn's mind raced through scenarios. Option A, lunge for the vase. Maybe catch it. Maybe get blamed for escalating. Maybe prove you care more about objects than children. Option B, shout at and to stop. Assert authority. Probably exactly what all the others did. Probably exactly what and expects. Option C, do nothing. Let it smash. Show you're not invested. Show you don't care about Wilson's money. But then what? What comes after that? 1. How much do you think it costs? Quinn's asked suddenly, and froze mid-count. What? The vase. How much do you think your father paid for it? Alice stopped mid-tantrum, her mouth hanging open. This wasn't in their script either. "I don't know," and said slowly, suspicion dripping from every word. "A lot. Probably," Quinn's agreed. She took one small step forward. Not toward the vase, toward and. "But you know what costs more than that vase?" "What?" Anne's arms were still raised, but wavering now. "Your therapy bills. When you're 16 and realize you spent your childhood breaking things because breaking things was the only way anyone looked at you." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus' hand froze on his radio. Wilson's eyes narrowed. And little and with her wild hair and wilder eyes, just stared. "You don't know anything," she whispered. "You're right," Quinn said. "I don't. But I know what it's like to be so angry you want to break everything around you. I know what it's like to scream and have nobody really hear you." "Liar!" Alice shrieked. "Adults don't get angry. Adults don't scream." "I screamed 3 days ago," Quinn said quietly. "When the eviction notice came. I screamed so loud my neighbor called the police." She wasn't supposed to admit that. Wasn't supposed to show weakness. But something in the twins' faces, that desperate searching hunger, made her throw away the playbook everyone else had tried to follow. "The police came?" And asked, the vase lowering slightly. "They did. They asked if I was okay. I said yes. They left." Quinns took another step forward. "But I wasn't okay. I'm still not okay. And you know what? It's okay to not be okay." Wilson's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Marcus. Status update. 11 minutes elapsed, sir. Subject is engaging in non-standard interaction." "I can see that." Wilson's tone was unreadable. "Continue observation." But Quinns caught something in his voice. Not quite surprise. Not quite interest. Something closer to curiosity. like a predator noticing prey behaving in an unexpected way, and lowered the vase slowly. She didn't set it down gently. She dropped it the last few inches. It hit the marble floor with a crack that splintered up one side but didn't shatter completely. There, and said, "It's broken but not dead. Just like Mommy." The words hung in the air like smoke. Just like Mommy. Quinns felt something cold slide down her spine. This wasn't just about control or testing boundaries. This was about grief that had nowhere to go except outward, exploding like shrapnel, hurting anyone who got close. "Your mother," Quinns started. "Is dead," Alice finished. "They told us she went away, but we're not stupid. Dead means gone forever. Dead means Daddy works all the time. Dead means everyone who comes here leaves too." She said it matter-of-factly, like reciting a weather report. But her hands were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles had gone white. Quinn's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry," and spat. "Sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't make Daddy come home. Sorry doesn't make the screaming stop." "What's screaming?" Quinns asked. The twins looked at each other. Another one of those silent communications. "The screaming in our heads," Alice whispered. "It never stops." And that's when Quinns did something that sealed her fate, one way or another. She lowered herself to the floor, not kneeling like a supplicant, not crouching like she was approaching wild animals, just sitting, cross-legged on the cold marble, surrounded by destruction, in the middle of a psychological war zone. Her hands were shaking. Her breath was uneven. But she sat. "What are you doing?" and demanded. Honestly. Quinn's voice cracked. "I don't know. I'm terrified. I'm exhausted. I'm probably going to fail this just like everyone else. But I'm so tired of standing." She looked up at the twins, really looked at them. Not at the chaos they'd created. Not at the weapons they still held. But at their faces. At the dark circles under their eyes. At the way they held themselves like soldiers who'd been at war too long. "I'm scared too," Quinns admitted. "I'm scared I'm going to lose my apartment. I'm scared my son is going to hate me for taking this job. I'm scared that even $60,000 won't be enough to fix what's broken in my life." $60,000? Alice's eyes went wide. "Daddy's paying you $60,000? "If I last 24 hours, Quinns said. "Which, at this rate, seems impossible." "Good," and said, but her voice had lost its edge. "You should fail. Everyone does." "Probably." Quinns didn't argue. "But I'm going to try anyway. Because trying is all I have left." The twins stared at her. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when everyone's waiting for someone else to break first. In the surveillance room, Wilson leaned forward. 12 screens showed 12 angles of the same scene. A woman sitting on his floor. His daughters, frozen mid-chaos, staring at her. 15 minutes, Marcus reported. "Sir, she's not following any known pattern." "No," Wilson agreed quietly. "She's not. Should I intervene? No. Wilson's eyes never left the screens. Let it play out. Sir, with all due respect, if she's planning some kind of psychological manipulation, then I'll handle it. Wilson's tone left no room for argument. Right now, she's doing something 17 others couldn't do. What's that, sir? Wilson watched his daughters take a small step toward the woman on the floor. Anne's hand loosened its grip on the next projectile. Alice's screaming had stopped entirely. She's making them curious, Wilson said softly. And curious children don't attack. They investigate. Back in the living room, Alice moved closer. If you're so scared, why did you come? Because, Quinn said honestly, being broke is scarier than you too. Alice's face twisted, somewhere between insulted and impressed. We made Nanny Rosa pee herself. That's horrible and impressive at the same time, Quinns admitted. But I've already peed myself once this week during a panic attack, so you're going to have to work harder than that. You peed yourself? And shock was so complete she forgot to yell. Panic attack in a Target bathroom, Quinns confirmed. Worst day of my life. Until today, maybe. For the first time since Quinns arrived, one of the twins laughed. It was Alice. A sharp, surprised bark of laughter that she immediately tried to cover with her hand, as if laughing was somehow against the rules, and stared at her sister like she'd just grown a second head. You laughed, and accused. I didn't mean to, Alice said quickly, defensively. But you did. It was an accident. The sisters looked at each other, and something passed between them. Some unspoken agreement. Some recalculation of strategy. They hadn't planned for laughter. Wilson's phone buzzed. A message from his second-in-command. Meeting in 20. Need you there. He typed back. Delayed. Handle preliminaries. Another buzz. Everything okay? Wilson looked at the screens. At his daughters. At the woman still sitting on the floor like she'd planted roots there. No, he thought. But it's interesting. He typed. Fine. We'll update. Okay, and said suddenly, decisively. New rule. What rule? Quinns asked warily. If you make it to bedtime, you can sleep on the couch. Most nannies don't make it to bedtime. It wasn't kindness. It was barely even tolerance. But it was the first time either twin had acknowledged the possibility that Quinns might last beyond the next hour. When's bedtime? Quinns asked. Alice smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that looked far too old for her face. Whenever Daddy says. And he never says. Of course, Quinns thought. Even the schedule is a trap. Then I guess I'd better get comfortable on the floor, Quinn said. You're weird, and declared. I get that a lot. Mommy was weird too, Alice said softly. Then, almost as an afterthought, that's not an insult. Weird was good. The words hit Quinns like a physical blow. Mommy was weird too. Past tense. Forever past tense. What was her name? Quinns asked gently. Elena, and whispered. But Daddy doesn't like us to say it anymore. He says it makes him. She stopped herself, looking toward the doorway where Wilson had been standing. He was gone. When had he left? How long had it been? He's watching on the cameras, Alice explained, following Quinn's gaze. He always watches, even when you can't see him. A chill ran through Quinn's body. She'd known about cameras. Marcus had mentioned surveillance, but hearing it from a 5-year-old made it real in a different way. This house was a panopticon, and Wilson was the invisible warden. Does that scare you? Quinns asked. That he's always watching? No, and said immediately. Too quickly. Yes, Alice admitted at the same time. The sisters looked at each other. Anne's face flushed with anger, or maybe shame. It doesn't scare me, Anne insisted. It means he cares. It means he doesn't trust us, Alice countered. Same thing. It's not. And just like that, the fragile détente shattered. The twins turned on each other, screaming, arguing about surveillance and trust and love and what their father meant by his absence. Quinn stayed on the floor, watching, learning. These weren't attacks. These were questions disguised as chaos. Does Daddy love us? Why doesn't he come home? Why does everyone leave? Are we too broken to fix? Every scream was a question they weren't allowed to ask out loud. Hour 1. 7:03 p.m. 16 minutes had elapsed. Marcus updated the log. Subject remains in primary engagement zone. No retreat attempts. Twins showing decreased aggression levels. Unusual pattern emerging. In his private office 3 floors down, Wilson read the update on his tablet. Unusual pattern emerging. He set the tablet down and pressed his fingers against his temples. 17 nannies. 17 failures. He'd hired the best, credentialed professionals with decades of experience, former military personnel with psychological training, even a child psychologist with a PhD from Harvard. All of them had broken, because Anne and Alice didn't need a professional. They needed. Wilson stopped the thought before it could fully form. He'd hired this woman because she was desperate. Desperation bred resilience. That was the theory. But watching her sit on his floor, admitting weakness to his daughters, laughing about panic attacks in Target bathrooms, that wasn't resilience. That was something else entirely. Something that looked dangerously close to authenticity. And authenticity was a currency Wilson hadn't dealt in for a very long time. Back in the penthouse, Quinns checked her watch. 7:03 p.m. 16 minutes, she thought. Only 23 hours and 44 minutes to go. The number was astronomical. Impossible. But Tommy was waiting. The eviction was coming. And these 2 small girls with their wild eyes and broken hearts were still standing in front of her, waiting to see what she'd do next. Are you going to sit there all night? Anne demanded. Maybe, Quinn said. Are you going to throw things at me all night? Maybe, Anne echoed, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. I'm hungry, Alice announced suddenly. Anne's face went pale. We're not supposed to say that. Why not? Because Daddy says hungry is weak. Hungry is hungry, Quinns interjected. Has nothing to do with weak or strong. It's just hungry. The twins looked at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Nanny Catherine said we eat when Daddy says, Alice explained. Not when we want. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Food controlled. Sleep schedule controlled. Every biological need turned into a compliance test. Well, Quinn said slowly, I'm hungry too. And unless there's a rule against the nanny eating, I'm going to find the kitchen. You're welcome to join me. Or you can keep throwing things. Your choice. She stood up slowly. Her legs had gone numb from sitting, and started walking toward what she hoped was the kitchen. Neither twin threw anything. Instead, after a moment of shocked silence, she heard two sets of small feet following behind her. In the surveillance room, Marcus updated the log again. Subject has initiated movement towards secondary living space, kitchen. Twins following voluntarily. No coercion observed. Time elapsed. 19 minutes. He added a note at the bottom, something he never did in official logs. Sir, this one's different. Wilson read the message and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Different, he muttered to the empty office. Different didn't mean better. Different didn't mean she'd last. Different just meant he'd have to watch more carefully when she broke. Because they all break eventually, he reminded himself. Money, morality, willpower. Everything has a breaking point. It's just a matter of finding it. He pulled up the kitchen camera feed and settled in to watch Mary Quinns discover just how many rules his daughters had learned to live by. This was going to be a very long night. Hour 3, 9:47 p.m. The kitchen détente lasted exactly 43 minutes. That's how long it took for Anne and Alice to finish their sandwiches, drink their milk, and remember they were supposed to be destroying the woman who dared to enter their home. Nanny Sophia made it to dinner too, and said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. Then she cried into the mashed potatoes. Quinns looked up from the sink where she'd been washing dishes. Another task no previous nanny had apparently attempted. Why was she crying? Because Alice told her our mommy was murdered, and said matter-of-factly, with a knife, in the bathtub, by Daddy. Quinn's hands froze in the soapy water. It's not true, Alice added quickly. Mommy had cancer. But Nanny Sophia didn't know that. She cried for 20 minutes. Then Daddy fired her. Daddy fires nannies who cry, both twins said in unison, like reciting a nursery rhyme. There it is, Quinns thought. Round 2. She dried her hands slowly, buying time. Her heart was pounding again, but she kept her face neutral. That was a cruel thing to say to Nanny Sophia. We know, and said, watching Quinns carefully. Are you going to cry about it? No. Why not? Because I'm not Nanny Sophia. Quinns turned to face them fully. And lying about how your mother died doesn't hurt me. It hurts you. Alice's face flushed red. You don't know anything about us. You're right. I don't. Quinns kept her voice even. But I know what grief looks like when it's got nowhere to go except sideways. And picked up a glass. Not threatening to throw it, just holding it. Turning it slowly in her hands. Nanny Catherine made it 4 hours. She locked herself in the bathroom after Alice bit her. I didn't bite hard, Alice protested. Hard enough to draw blood. Quinn's eyes flicked to Alice's mouth, then away. Don't react. They're testing. Nanny Jennifer lasted until midnight, Alice continued, encouraged by Quinn's silence. She fainted when and told her we see ghosts. She hit her head on the coffee table. There was blood everywhere. The guards carried her out, and added, she was still unconscious. We never saw her again. They were watching Quinn's like scientists observing a lab rat, waiting for the fear response, the disgust, the breaking point. Every nanny before you has a horror story. What's yours going to be? Quinn's felt the weight of 17 failures pressing down on her shoulders. 17 women, qualified, experienced, desperate like her, who'd walk through that door and couldn't survive what waited inside. You're thinking about quitting, and observed. Your face is doing the thing. What thing? The thing they all do. Right before they start crying. Your eyes get watery and you look at the door. Was I looking at the door? Quinn's realized she had been. Her body had started calculating escape routes without her permission. In the surveillance room, Wilson's voice crackled through Marcus' earpiece. Initiate pressure test 3. Sir, we're ahead of schedule. Now, Wilson commanded. Before she settles. Marcus hesitated, then pressed a button on the console. Immediately, the lights in the kitchen dimmed. Not completely. Just enough to make the shadows grow longer. Then the temperature dropped. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. But Quinn's noticed. And more importantly, the twins noticed her noticing. The house does that, Alice said softly. When Daddy's watching. When Daddy's disappointed, and corrected. Quinn's throat went dry. The casual control. The environmental manipulation. This wasn't childcare. It was behavioral conditioning on an industrial scale. He's making the house uncomfortable. Seeing if I'll ask to leave. Seeing if the atmosphere alone will break me. She thought about the previous nannies Marcus had mentioned. How many of them had felt this same creeping dread? How many had blamed themselves for being too weak, when really they were just human beings responding to calculated psychological warfare? Nanny Rosa started talking to herself, Alice whispered, moving closer. Hour 5. She kept saying, I can do this, I can do this. But she couldn't. Nobody can. Nanny Margaret tried to call the police, and added. Said we were in danger. Said Daddy was unfit. The police laughed at her. Do you know who Daddy is? I know enough, Quinn said quietly. Then you know nobody wins, Alice said. The house always wins. Daddy always wins. We just exist in the middle. The phrasing was too adult, too defeated. These children had been trained, consciously or not, to be complicit in their own isolation. They're not trying to scare me away, Quinn's realized with sudden, horrifying clarity. They're trying to warn me. Because they don't know the difference anymore. Where's your father now? Quinn's asked. Both twins pointed upward. Watching, they said together. Quinns looked at the ceiling. She couldn't see the cameras, but she felt them. Dozens of eyes. Hundreds of recorded hours of failure. What does he see when he watches? Does he see children? Or does he see ammunition? He's waiting for you to quit, and explained. They all quit. Some take longer than others, but they all quit. Or get fired, Alice added. That's worse. Getting fired means you failed so bad you couldn't even quit right. The twisted logic was almost impressive. In Wilson's world, even surrender had to be done correctly. Quinns felt something shift inside her chest. Not courage exactly. Something more dangerous. Anger. Not at the twins. They were victims of this system, not architects. But at the man watching from somewhere above. The man who'd turned parenting into psychological warfare. Who'd taught his daughters that love was surveillance and connection was weakness. No wonder they scream, she thought. Screaming is the only thing he can't control. I need to sit down, Quinns said. The twins exchanged glances. On the couch. No. Right here. Quinns lowered herself to the kitchen floor. The tile was cold against her legs, sending a chill up her spine. The house's environmental controls were still active. Temperature dropping degree by degree. He's watching. Let him watch. What are you doing? And demanded. Exactly what I said. Sitting down. But you're supposed to. Alice stopped. What are you supposed to do? I don't know, Quinns admitted. What did the others do at this point? Nanny Catherine started praying and said, Nanny Rosa tried to make us go to bed, Alice added. Like we were the problem. Nanny Jennifer just stood there crying until the guards came. Quinns nodded slowly. Praying. Asserting authority. Collapsing. The three standard responses to psychological torture. She chose a fourth option. Acknowledgement. I'm tired, she said simply. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. And sitting on the floor is the only honest thing I can think to do right now. The twins stared at her. You're supposed to pretend you're not scared, and said uncertainly. Why? You'd know I was lying. Yes, but... and faltered. That's what adults do. They lie. They pretend everything's fine when it's not, Alice agreed. When Mommy was sick, everyone said she was getting better. Even when she wasn't. Even when we could see she wasn't. The room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the city 70 stories below. In his office, Wilson leaned forward. The camera angle showed Quinns from above, a woman sitting on his kitchen floor, not moving, barely breathing. His daughters standing over her, confused. Status, he demanded. 3 hours, 12 minutes elapsed, Marcus reported. Subject is non-responsive to standard pressure protocols. Increase environmental controls. Sir, we're already at. Increase them. The temperature dropped another 2 degrees. The lights dimmed further. On screen, Quinns shivered but didn't stand. Didn't speak. Just sat there like she'd taken root. What are you doing? Wilson thought, studying her face on the monitor. "What's your strategy?" But her face showed no strategy, no calculation, just exhaustion, and something that looked almost like surrender. Not to him, not to the situation, to the simple, devastating honesty of not knowing what came next. Alice sat down first, not next to Quinn's, about 3 feet away, cross-legged, mirroring Quinn's posture. "What are you doing?" and hissed. "My feet hurt," Alice said, "from standing all day." It was transparently false. They'd been running, jumping, destroying things. But it was also an excuse, a way to join Quinn's without admitting she wanted to, and hesitated. Then, with visible reluctance, she sat too. 3 people sitting on a kitchen floor. Not talking, not crying, not fighting, just existing in the same uncomfortable space. "This is weird," and said finally. "Yeah," Quinn's agreed. "Are we going to sit here all night?" "I don't know. Maybe." "That's stupid." "Probably." Alice laughed, that same surprised bark from earlier, and shot her a look but didn't say anything. And somewhere above them, Heriberto Wilson watched 3 people sit in silence on his kitchen floor and realized that for the first time in 17 attempts, he had absolutely no idea what would happen next. Hour 4, 10:51 p.m. Quinn's realized it when she went to check her watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. There were no clocks. Not in the kitchen. Not in the living room. Not in the hallway she'd walked through earlier. She'd been in this penthouse for over 4 hours and hadn't seen a single clock face. How is that possible? She stood from the kitchen floor, her legs protesting after sitting so long, and scanned the walls. Expensive art. Recessed lighting. Minimalist design. But no clocks. Not even digital ones on the appliances. Looking for the time? And asked, still sitting. There was something almost amused in her voice. "Where are the clocks?" "Daddy took them out," Alice said. "After Nanny Margaret kept checking hers every 2 minutes. He said it was distracting. He said time doesn't matter if you're doing your job right," and added, "Only people who want to leave care about time." The logic was poison wrapped in silk. If you're watching the clock, you're already planning your escape. Quinn's felt her chest tighten. Her phone was gone, confiscated by Marcus in the first 15 minutes. No clocks. No way to track how much longer until sunrise. Until the 24-hour mark. Until $60,000 and freedom. Time itself is a weapon, she realized. And I just lost the ability to measure it. How do you know when to go to bed? Quinn's asked. The twins looked at each other. When we're tired, Alice said. Or when Daddy says, and corrected. Whichever comes first. Which is it usually? When Daddy says, both twins answered in unison. Quinn's walked to the window, those massive floor-to-ceiling panels that made the penthouse feel like a glass cage suspended in the sky. The city glowed below, and in the reflection she caught it. A camera. He liked you, Alice said softly. No, he didn't, and corrected. He's just interested. That's different. How can you tell? Because when he doesn't like someone, he doesn't talk to them at all, and explained. He just sends guards to remove them. If he's talking to you, it means he's still deciding. Deciding what? The twins looked at each other. Another one of those silent conversations. If you're worth keeping, Alice finally said. Or if you're just another failure. Quinns walked back to the kitchen, her mind racing. No clocks. Locked doors. Cameras everywhere. Guards who responded to alarms but not screams. She'd tested that theory earlier when the twins were shrieking, and not a single guard appeared until she did something wrong. The system wasn't designed to protect the children from chaos. It was designed to protect Wilson's control. And every nanny before her had tried to fight that control. Tried to impose order. Tried to establish authority. And every single one of them lost. Because you can't win against a system that controls time, space, and surveillance, Quinns thought. You can't win by playing the game. You can only survive by refusing to play. She looked at her wrist again, at the watch that had become useless the moment Marcus took her phone. The second hand swept around the face, measuring seconds that no longer mattered. Because in Wilson's world, time wasn't measured in hours and minutes. It was measured in breaking points. And Quinns had just learned she was still intact enough to be interesting. But interesting doesn't mean safe, she reminded herself. It just means I'm still being evaluated. She thought about the 17 nannies who'd come before. How many of them had reached this moment? This realization that they weren't employees. They were subjects in an ongoing experiment? And how many of them had figured it out too late? What time is it really? Quinns asked the twins, and pulled something from her pocket, a small digital watch, clearly forbidden, clearly hidden. 10:51, she whispered. Don't tell Daddy we have this. It's our secret. We need to know, Alice added. Even if Daddy says we don't. We need to know how much longer until morning. Quinns understood completely. Because when you can't see time passing, every minute feels like an hour. Every hour feels like forever. And forever is exactly how long Wilson wanted his tests to feel. Time itself is the weapon, Quinns thought again. And I just lost track of how many hours I have left to survive. She looked at the twins' contraband watch. 13 hours and 9 minutes until sunrise. 13 hours and 9 minutes until $60,000. 13 hours and 9 minutes until she either walked out a survivor or was carried out a failure. The house always wins, Alice had said. But maybe, Quinns thought, just maybe you could learn to survive by its rules long enough to change them. Hour 6. 12:47 a.m. The shift happened so suddenly Quinns almost missed it. One moment, Anne and Alice were sitting quietly on the couch, exhausted from hours of chaos. The next, and was screaming, I hate you. You always get everything. Alice screamed back, her voice hitting that pitch that made Quinns' teeth ache. You're a liar. You stole my doll. It was my doll first. Liar. 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 The twins lunged at each other, a tangle of small fists and wild hair. They rolled across the floor, shrieking accusations that made no sense. But their eyes were locked on Quinn's. Not on each other. On her. They're watching to see what I'll do, Quinn's realized. This is theater. Stop it, Quinn said, not moving from where she sat. Both of you. She started it. And wailed, pointing at Alice. He started it. Alice shot back, then froze. I mean SHE. The slip was so quick Quinn's barely caught it. He. Not she. They're reenacting something Quinn's understood. A fight they've heard before. Between adults. Between their parents. The twins continued their performance, but there was something mechanical about it now. Rehearsed. Like actors who'd played the same scene too many times. You're going to separate us. And suddenly screamed at Quinn's. That's what they all do. They send one of us to our room. Nanny Rosa made and go to timeout. Alice added. For 3 hours. Alone. They'd stopped fighting each other. Now they were both staring at Quinn's, breathing hard, waiting. This was the test. Separate them and prove you'll use isolation as punishment. Keep them together and fail to establish control. Quinn's stood slowly. The twins tensed, ready to scatter or escalate. Come here, Quinn said quietly. No, and said immediately. You're going to. I'm not going to separate you. Quinn sat on the floor, cross-legged. Both of you. Come here. Neither twin moved. You're lying, Alice accused. You're going to pick one of us. They always pick one. I'm not picking anyone. I'm asking both of you to sit with me. Why? Anne's voice was sharp with suspicion. Because fighting is exhausting, and I'm tired of watching you hurt each other when you're not even really mad. Silence. Then Alice said softly, How did you know? Your eyes, Quinn said. You're watching me, not each other. This isn't a real fight. It's a performance. The twins looked at each other. Another one of those silent conversations. Then, slowly, they moved toward Quinn's. Not close. Still maintaining distance. But closer than they'd been all night. Nanny Catherine separated us, and said quietly, sitting about 2 feet from Quinn's. She said we were feeding off each other's negative energy. She made Alice stay in her room for the whole afternoon. I screamed for 3 hours, Alice added, sitting on Quinn's other side. Nobody came. Not even Daddy. Nanny Jennifer said we needed to learn independence, and continued. She said twins are too codependent. She tried to make us sleep in separate rooms. We broke the door, Alice said simply. That's when she fainted. Quinn's looked between them. These children had been systematically separated by adults who believed isolation built character, who saw their bond as something to break instead of protect. You're supposed to separate us, and said. That's what all the parenting books say. Daddy showed them to Nanny Margaret. Encourage individual identity. Prevent codependency. That's what they say. Well, Quinn said carefully, I don't have those books, so I guess I'll have to figure it out myself. How? Alice whispered. Quinn's took a breath. If you're scared, you can be scared together. The twins froze. What? Anne's voice was barely audible. Being scared together doesn't make you weak. It makes you less alone. But Daddy says, Alice started. I'm not your daddy, Quinns interrupted gently. And right now, in this moment, I'm telling you it's okay to need each other. Something broke in Anne's face. Not tears, not yet. But something crumbled. Some wall she'd been holding up for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to let it fall. She reached out, not to Quinns but to Alice. Her hand found her sister's hand. Their fingers interlocked. Alice started crying. Not the performative screaming from earlier. Real tears. Quiet. Devastating. Nobody ever said that before, Alice whispered. Everyone tries to make us separate. Everyone says we're too close. Too much. Even Mommy, and added softly. Before she died. She said we needed to learn to be apart. She said when she was gone we couldn't. Her voice broke. We couldn't rely on each other so much. Quinns felt her own throat tighten. Elena Wilson, dying, trying to prepare her daughters for a world where they'd be alone. Where even their twin bond would be weaponized against them. Your mother was scared, Quinns said quietly. Scared of leaving you. Sometimes scared people give bad advice. Is that why you're here? And asked. Because you're scared. Yes. Of what? Losing my son. Losing my home. Losing myself, I guess. The twins absorbed this. Then Alice said, We're scared too. All the time. I know. No one ever says they know, and whispered. They just tell us to stop being scared. Like it's something we can turn off. For exactly 90 seconds, there was peace. 3 people sitting on the floor. 2 small hands clasped together. Quiet breathing. The city glowing outside the windows. Then and pulled away. Sharply. Violently. As if the tenderness had burned her. No, she said, standing up fast. No, no, no. This is wrong. Alice looked stricken. And we're not supposed to. Anne's hands were shaking. Daddy says we can't be weak. If we're weak, people leave. If we're weak, we get hurt. She grabbed a book from the coffee table and hurled it across the room. It slammed into the wall with a crack that echoed through the penthouse. The chaos was back. But this time, Quinns could see it for what it was. Terror disguised as violence. Alice stood too, joining her sister. You're just like the others. She screamed at Quinns. You're trying to trick us. Trying to make us soft so Daddy fires you. Or so you can hurt us. And added, throwing another book. They were spiraling. The brief moment of vulnerability had terrified them more than any of their own tests had. Because vulnerability is what gets punished here, Quinns realized. Not chaos. Not violence. Vulnerability. Quinns heard movement in the hallway. Guards. Responding to the noise. Ready to intervene, to drag the twins to separate rooms. To restore order through force. But then Wilson's voice came through the speakers. Just 2 words. "Stand down." The footsteps stopped. "Sir." Marcus' voice crackled through somewhere. "I said stand down. Let them work through it." The guards retreated. Wilson was watching, listening, and for reasons Quinns couldn't understand, he'd just given her room to fail or succeed without interference. Why? Quinns stood slowly, making herself a target. "Throw them," she said calmly. "Throw all the books. Throw everything in this room if you need to." And had already grabbed another book. She hurled it. Quinns didn't move. It missed her by inches. "Why aren't you stopping us?" Alice demanded. "Because you're not trying to hurt me. You're trying to hurt the feeling of being vulnerable. And I can't stop you from that. You're stupid." And screamed, but there were tears on her face now. "Probably," Quinns agreed. "But I'm still here." "For now," Alice whispered, and suddenly the chaos drained out of her. She sank back to the floor, exhausted. "Everyone's here for now." Then they disappear. And lowered the book she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. "Mommy disappeared," she said softly. "Nanny after nanny after nanny. They're all here, then they're gone. Like they were never real." Alice looked up at Quinns, and in her eyes was something that made Quinns' heart break. Not anger. Not chaos. Just a question that had been asked 17 times before and never answered honestly. "Will you disappear too?" Alice whispered. And Quinns, standing in a penthouse full of cameras and locked doors and broken children, realized she had no idea how to answer that. Because in 13 hours, she'd either walk out with $60,000, or she'd become ghost number 18 in the Wilson twins' graveyard of abandoned hope. Hour 7. 1:47 a.m. Exhaustion was a living thing now. It sat on Quinns' chest like a weight, pressing down with each breath. Her eyes burned. Her head throbbed. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest that wouldn't come. The twins had finally gone quiet around 1:30 a.m. Not asleep. Quinns had learned they never actually slept on schedule, just quiet, and had retreated to the playroom. Alice had disappeared somewhere into the depths of the penthouse. For the first time in 7 hours, Quinns was alone. She should check on them. That's what a nanny would do. But her legs wouldn't move. Her body had mutinied, refusing to carry her one more step. Just 5 minutes, she told herself, closing her eyes where she sat on the couch. Just 5 minutes of not being watched, tested, evaluated. She heard it then. Soft, almost inaudible. Crying. Not the performative wailing from earlier. This was different. Private. The sound someone makes when they think no one can hear them. Alice. Quinns found her in the hallway bathroom. The only room without cameras. The only space in the entire penthouse where Wilson's eyes couldn't reach. Alice sat in the empty bathtub, fully clothed, knees pulled to her chest. Her face was buried in her arms. Her small body shook with sobs she was trying desperately to keep silent. Nanny Catherine locked herself in a bathtub. Quinns remembered. Maybe she wasn't the first person to do it. Alice. Quinns whispered. The crying stopped instantly. Alice's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. No, she gasped. No, 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 you can't. Daddy can't know. The cameras don't work in here, Quinn said gently, stepping inside and closing the door. Remember. You told me. But you'll tell, Alice whispered. You'll tell Daddy I was crying. That I was weak. I won't tell anyone. You're lying. Everyone tells. Quinn sat on the bathroom floor, her back against the tub. Close enough to be present. Far enough to not crowd. What are you afraid will happen if he knows? Alice's voice came out small, broken. He'll stop loving us. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alice, Quinn said carefully. Why do you think that? Because Mommy told us, Alice whispered. Before she died. She said Daddy loves us, but he doesn't know how to show it. She said we had to be strong. Had to be quiet. She said if we were too loud, too messy, too much, he wouldn't be able to love us anymore. Quinns felt something crack inside her chest. She said silence earns love, Alice continued, tears streaming down her face. But we're not good at being silent. We tried after she died. We tried so hard. But the quiet made the sadness louder, so we started screaming instead. And now Daddy won't come home, a voice said from the doorway, and stood there, face pale, eyes blazing with fury. You weren't supposed to tell her that. I'm sorry. We promised Mommy we'd be strong. Ann's voice cracked. We promised we wouldn't be weak and needy and... I can't do it anymore. Alice sobbed. I can't be strong anymore. I'm so tired, Ann. I'm so tired. Ann's anger collapsed. She stumbled into the bathroom, sinking to the floor beside the tub. Me too, she whispered. I'm tired too. Quinns watched these two small girls. These children who'd been taught that love was conditional. That vulnerability was weakness. That silence was currency and noise was bankruptcy. No wonder they scream, she thought. They're trying to be heard by a father who only listens to quiet. They're trapped between their mother's dying wishes and their own desperate need to be seen. Your mother was wrong, Quinn said softly. Both twins looked at her, shocked. She was dying and scared, and she gave you terrible advice. Silence doesn't earn love. Silence just makes you disappear. But Daddy, and started. Your father is terrified, Quinns interrupted. Terrified of losing you the way he lost your mother. So he built this fortress and filled it with cameras and guards and rules. Because control feels safer than love. But it's not working. You're not safer. You're just quieter. And quieter isn't the same as okay. Alice climbed out of the tub, moving toward Quinns. Are you scared too? Of disappearing? Terrified, Quinns admitted. My son, Tommy, he's 7. After his father left, I became so scared of not being enough that I worked myself into exhaustion. I took extra shifts, skipped meals, stopped sleeping. And you know what happened. What? And whispered. I got so quiet Tommy stopped asking me questions. Stopped telling me about his day. He learned that Mommy was too tired, too stressed, too gone. Even though I was right there. Quinn's voice broke. I disappeared while still being present. And that's the worst kind of disappearing. Because you're a ghost in your own life. Alice sat in Quinn's lap. Just climbed up and settled there like she'd been doing it forever. Her small body was warm, solid, real. I don't want to be a ghost, Alice whispered. Then don't be quiet when you need to be loud, Quinn said. Don't be strong when you need to fall apart. Don't earn love, that's not how love works. And moved closer, pressing against Quinn's side. Mommy said, your mother was dying and desperate, and she loved you so much she gave you a map for the wrong journey. Quinn's wrapped an arm around and, she taught you survival. But you don't need to survive anymore. You need to live. We don't know how, Anne admitted, and for the first time since Quinn's arrived, she sounded exactly like what she was, a 5-year-old child who was drowning. Neither do I, Quinn said honestly. But maybe we can figure it out together. The exhaustion that had been pressing on Quinn's chest spread to the twins. Alice's breathing slowed. Her body grew heavy. Anne's head dropped to Quinn's shoulder, her defenses finally, completely empty. Don't leave, Alice mumbled, half asleep. Please don't leave. I'm here, Quinn's whispered, though she had no idea if that was a promise she could keep. Nanny Catherine said that, and murmured, eyes closing. Then she left. Mommy said that, Alice added, her voice distant. Then she died. Everyone leaves, they said together, a liturgy of abandonment they'd learned by heart. And then they were asleep. 2 small girls draped across Quinn's like living proof that something had shifted. That 7 hours of psychological warfare had broken something open. Not them. The system. In his office, Wilson watched the bathroom door on his monitor. No cameras inside, but he could see the closed door. Could see the timestamp. 2:04 a.m. They'd been in there for 17 minutes. His hand moved to the intercom button. He should check in. Should monitor. Should. He pulled his hand back. For the first time in 17 attempts, he had no data. No visual confirmation. No way to know what was happening behind that door. She took them to the one place I can't watch. It should have made him angry. Should have triggered every control instinct he'd honed over decades in a world where information was power and blindness was death. But instead he felt something else. Something that felt dangerously close to relief. Because maybe, he thought, maybe they need a place where I'm not watching. Marcus' voice crackled through the intercom. Sir. Status check. It's been 18 minutes since. Stand down, Wilson said quietly. Sir. Stand down. Let them be. He looked at the bathroom door on the screen. Closed. Locked. Private. And then Heriberto Wilson, a man who'd built an empire on information, surveillance, and control, did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He turned off the monitors. All of them. The screens went dark. And in the sudden silence of his office, surrounded by blank screens and the distant hum of the city, Wilson sat in the darkness and wondered when exactly he'd become the kind of father his daughters needed to hide from. 2:04 a.m. The timestamp read before going black. Halfway through the night. Halfway to sunrise. Halfway to whatever came next. Hour 14. 8:47 a.m. Quinns woke to screaming. Not the twins, her own body, protesting every movement. She'd fallen asleep on the bathroom floor. The twins sprawled across her like warm, breathing weights. Her neck was twisted at an angle that sent knives of pain down her spine. Her legs had gone numb hours ago. How long did we sleep? The twins were already awake, pulling away from her. The tenderness from 2 a.m. had evaporated like morning fog. "Get up," and said, her voice sharp. "Cold. Daddy's awake. He'll want to see you." "He always checks in the morning," Alice added, not meeting Quinn's eyes. "To see if we're still alive." The bathroom door opened. Marcus stood there, expression unreadable. "Miss Quinns, the children need breakfast. Mr. Wilson requests you prepare it." Requests? Quinns thought bitterly. Everything here is a request that's actually a command. The kitchen felt different in daylight. Harsher. The windows that had glowed romantically at night now revealed every smudge, every crack in the expensive veneer. The city beyond looked washed out, exhausted. Like me, Quinns thought. 14 hours down. 10 to go. Her hands shook as she reached for the refrigerator. Exhaustion had moved past discomfort into something more dangerous. The kind of fatigue that made everything feel distant and dreamlike. Toast. And demanded. Exactly 2 minutes. Not too dark. Orange juice, Alice added. In the blue cup. Not the red one. They were testing again. Back to scripts. Back to control. The vulnerability from last night terrified them, Quinns realized. So now they're overcorrecting, proving they're still in charge. Quinns made the toast, poured the juice, set everything on the table with movements that felt mechanical, robotic. "You look terrible," and observed. Nanny Rosa looked like that right before she quit. "I'm fine." "That's what they all say," Alice said. Then, quieter. Right before they're not. The explosion came without warning. One moment, and was eating toast. The next, she was screaming. "This is wrong. Everything is wrong." She grabbed her plate and hurled it across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, sending ceramic shrapnel across the marble floor. And Quinns started. "Shut up." And's face was red, tears streaming. "You made US weak. You made US cry. Daddy's going to fire you and it's going to be your fault." She grabbed a glass ornament from the counter. One of those decorative pieces that cost more than Quinn's monthly rent used to be. "Put it down," Quinns said, but her voice had no force behind it. Just exhaustion. "No." And threw it. Not at the wall this time. At Quinns. Time slowed. Quinns saw it coming. Saw the crystal catching the morning light, spinning through the air. She tried to move, but her body was too slow, too tired too. It hit. Not directly. It grazed her forearm as she raised it to protect her face. But crystal doesn't graze gently. It cuts. Blood bloomed immediately. A long slash across her forearm. Deeper than it should be. Quinn stared at it, her mind unable to process. That's my blood. That's a lot of blood. The alarms shrieked to life. Not the motion sensors from last night. Something else. Emergency protocol. Guards flooded the kitchen. 4, 5, 6 of them. Marcus in the lead. His hand already on his radio. Medical emergency. Sector 1. Subject injured. Requesting. No. Alice screamed, launching herself between Quinn's and the guards. No, don't take her. It was an accident. It was an accident. And stood frozen, the horror of what she'd done crashing over her face. I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to. Blood dripped from Quinn's arm onto the pristine white floor. She watched it spread, thinking distantly that blood and marble made a striking contrast. I should say something, she thought. I should react. But she couldn't. The 14 hours had finally caught up to her. The fear, the vigilance, the constant performance of strength she didn't have. It was all gone. And then the guards parted. Heriberto Wilson walked into the kitchen. It was the first time Quinns had seen him up close. Really seen him. Not as a shadow in a doorway or a voice through speakers. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His suit was different from last night. Charcoal replaced with navy, but equally expensive. His face was handsome in a dangerous way, with eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Quinn's bleeding arm, then at Anne, then at Alice, still standing guard like a tiny soldier. Daddy, and started, her voice breaking. Wilson held up one hand. Silence fell like a guillotine. He walked past his daughters, past the guards, stopped directly in front of Quinn's. This is where they usually quit, he said quietly. His voice was different in person. Not colder, more present. Like he was finally actually there instead of observing from a distance. Quinn's looked up at him. Blood continued to drip from her arm. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Most of them are crying by now, Wilson continued, begging me to let them leave, or threatening to call the authorities, or, shut up. The words came out before Quinn's could stop them. The room went absolutely still. No one told Heriberto Wilson to shut up. But Quinn's was done. Done with tests. Done with surveillance. Done with watching two brilliant, traumatized children tear themselves apart because the only adult in their life had confused control with protection. You taught them silence is love, Quinn said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and fury. You taught them that fear is attention. You left them alone in a house full of cameras and guards and locked doors, and you called it protection. Wilson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You made them weapons, Quinn's continued, the words pouring out like blood from her wound. Weapons to test loyalty, to measure resilience. You turned your daughters into a psychological experiment because you're too terrified to actually be their father. You don't understand, Wilson started, his voice dangerously quiet. I understand perfectly. Quinn stood, swaying slightly. You lost your wife and decided the solution was to make sure you never lose control again. So you built this prison and called it a penthouse. You hired 17 women and watched them break and told yourself it proved they weren't strong enough for your daughters. She stepped closer, leaving bloody footprints on his marble floor. But the truth is they weren't breaking because of and Alice. They were breaking because of you. Because you created a system designed to destroy anyone who dares to care. And Alice stood frozen. They'd seen adults yell at each other before. Seen violence. Seen chaos. But they'd never seen anyone speak to their father like this. Never seen someone look at Heriberto Wilson, the man who made grown men cross the street to avoid him, and call him afraid. Wilson's jaw tightened. "You're injured," he said, as if Quinn's hadn't just stripped him bare. "You need medical attention." "I need you to see what you've done," Quinn shot back. "I need you to look at your daughters, really look at them, and admit that every nanny you've hired wasn't failing them. They were failing to survive you. This isn't. They think silence earns love." Quinn's voice cracked. "They think if they're too loud, too messy, too human, you'll stop loving them. Your wife told them that on her deathbed because she knew you wouldn't know how to handle their grief." The words landed like physical blows. Wilson's face went white. Behind him, Alice made a small, wounded sound. "So congratulations," Quinn said, blood dripping steadily now. "You've successfully taught your 5-year-old daughters that love is conditional, vulnerability is weakness, and the only way to get your attention is to break things, including themselves." Silence. No one moved. The guards stood like statues. The twins barely breathed. Even the city outside seemed to have gone quiet. Wilson stared at Quinn's, this broke, bleeding woman who'd lasted 14 hours in his carefully constructed nightmare and was now dismantling him with nothing but exhausted truth. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he finally said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Don't I?" Quinn swayed again. "I'm a single mother drowning in debt, terrified every day that I'm not enough for my son. I took this job because I'm desperate, because I thought money could fix everything. But you know what I learned in the last 14 hours." She looked at and Alice, these two small girls who'd taught her more about survival than any amount of money ever could. Money doesn't fix broken. It just makes the breaking more expensive. And then Quinn's legs gave out. She didn't fall dramatically, just folded, like a puppet with cut strings. Marcus lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. And in the sudden chaos of guards calling for medical, of Alice screaming, of and crying, Heriberto Wilson stood perfectly still, staring at the blood on his marble floor. And for the first time in 3 years, he had absolutely no idea what to do next. Hour 15, 9:34 a.m. Quinn's woke up on a couch she didn't recognize. Her arm was bandaged. Professional work, tight and clean. And 4 drip hung beside her, clear fluid running into her vein. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning sun. "Where?" "You lost a significant amount of blood." Wilson's voice came from the shadows. The penthouse has a medical suite. 3 floors down. Quinns turned her head, too fast, the room spinning, and found him sitting in a chair by the window. Not in his usual position of power. Just sitting. Elbows on his knees. Hands clasped. Looking tired. The twins, Quinns said immediately. With their therapist. Emergency session. Wilson's voice was flat. First time I've called her in 6 months. 6 months. Quinns tried to sit up. The 4 tugged. They haven't seen a therapist in 6 months? She quit. Wilson didn't look at her. Said I was undermining her treatment. Said if I wasn't willing to participate in family therapy, she couldn't help them. And you didn't find another one. I found 4 others. They all quit for the same reason. Silence settled between them like ash. My father, Wilson said suddenly, believed children were investments. You put in discipline, structure, fear, and you got out obedience, success, power. Quinn said nothing, just listened. He ran his empire from our living room. I watched him negotiate deals where men's lives hung in the balance. Watched him smile while destroying someone's entire world. Wilson's hands tightened. He never raised his voice. Never had to. Control was his religion. And you learned from him. I learned that love was a weakness other men exploited. Wilson finally looked at her. My mother loved him. He used that love like a leash. When she got sick, he kept working. Said grief was self-indulgent. She died asking for him. He was in a meeting. Quinns heard the echo of and Alice in that story. History repeating. Trauma inherited like DNA. When Elena got sick, Wilson continued, his voice rougher now, I swore I'd be different. I'd be there. He stopped. But being there and knowing what to do are different things. So you did what you knew. Control. I did what kept them safe. The defensiveness crept back into his voice. This city is dangerous. My life is dangerous. The twins are leverage to anyone who wants to hurt me. The cameras, the guards, the locked doors. The isolation. The surveillance. The tests. Wilson's jaw clenched. I needed to know who I could trust around them. So you made trust impossible, Quinn said quietly. You created a system so brutal that only someone with nothing left to lose would survive it. And even then, you watched them break and called it their failure, not yours. Wilson stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You think I don't know what I've done? His voice was low, dangerous. You think I don't see it? Every nanny that walks out. Every therapist that quits. Every time my daughters flinch when I enter a room. Then why not change it? Because I don't know how. The words exploded out of him. I know how to intimidate, how to strategize, how to eliminate threats. But I don't know how to, his voice broke. I don't know how to be soft without being weak. Quinn sat up fully, ignoring the 4 pull. You think softness is weakness? In my world it is. Your daughters live in your world, Quinn said. And in their world your hardness is killing them. Wilson turned, and for the first time Quinn saw it. The exhaustion behind the control. The fear behind the power. The father buried beneath the Mafia Boss. Elena made me promise, he said quietly. Before she died. She said, don't let them be like you. Don't teach them that walls are safer than people. But he looked away. I didn't know how to keep that promise. So you broke it. Yes. Simple. Devastating. I broke it. The door opened. And Alice burst in, the therapist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, following close behind. Miss Quinn's. Alice ran to the couch, grabbing Quinn's unbandaged hand. You're awake. They said you lost blood. That you might not wake up. We told Dr. Patricia everything and said, her voice breaking. About last night. About Mommy. About. She looked at her father. About all of it. Wilson's face was unreadable. Dr. Patricia stepped forward. Mr. Wilson. We need to talk. Immediately. Later, Wilson said. No. Now. The therapist's voice was firm. These children have been living in a trauma response for 3 years. What happened this morning was a crisis point. If you don't. I said later, Wilson repeated, but there was no force behind it. Just exhaustion. Quinn's pulled the 4 from her arm. The therapist moved to stop her. Miss Quinn's, you need to. I need to leave, Quinn said simply. She looked at Wilson. You can send the payment to the agency. I lasted 14 hours. That's more than most. No. Alice's scream was primal. No, you can't leave. You promised. Ann's face crumpled. You said you were here. You said. I said a lot of things I shouldn't have, Quinn's interrupted gently. She cupped Alice's face. But you two need more than I can give. You need a father who's present. Therapy that actually works. A life that isn't. We need you, Alice sobbed. Please. Please don't disappear too. And grabbed Quinn's other hand. Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves. But you saw us. Really saw us. And we, her voice broke. We don't want you to be another ghost. Quinn's looked at Wilson. His daughters were clinging to her, begging her to stay. His therapist was waiting for him to make a decision. His carefully constructed world of control was crumbling around him. And he had to choose. I won't stay out of fear, Quinn said quietly. I won't stay because you're paying me. I won't stay to be another test subject in your experiment of parenthood. Then why would you stay? Wilson asked. If you asked me to. Really asked. Not as an employer. Not as. She gestured at the opulent medical suite. Whatever this is. But as a father who knows he's failing and wants to do better. The room went silent. Dr. Patricia watched. The twins held their breath. And Heriberto Wilson, the man who controlled territories, commanded loyalty through fear, who'd spent 3 years trying to parent through dominance, stood absolutely still. "I don't know how to do better," he admitted finally. "Then learn," Quinn said. "Start family therapy. Really start it. Turn off the cameras at night. Unlock the doors. Stop testing everyone who gets close to your daughters and start trusting that love doesn't need surveillance to survive. And if I can't, then I leave. And you get to explain to and Alice why another person they cared about disappeared. You get to watch them learn, one more time, that connection is dangerous and isolation is safer." Quinn stood, swaying slightly. "Is that the legacy you want? Is that what Elena asked you to build?" Wilson's face twisted, something that looked like pain. The twins were crying now, clinging to each other and to Quinn's. Dr. Patricia stepped forward. "Mr. Wilson, this is the moment. Right here. Choose." Wilson looked at his daughters. Really looked at them. Not through cameras. Not from a distance. Not as problems to be solved or assets to be protected. As children who were drowning and had found someone who could swim. He thought about his father. About obedience bought with fear. About his mother dying alone. About Elena's last words. "Don't let them be like you." He thought about 17 nannies walking out. And one who was standing her ground, bleeding, exhausted, refusing to stay unless he surrendered. "Stay," Wilson said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "What?" Quinns asked. He looked directly at her. "Stay. Please." Not an order. Not a negotiation. A surrender. "I don't know how to fix this," he continued, his voice rough. "I don't know how to be what they need. But you—" He gestured helplessly at his daughters, at the woman they were clinging to. "You lasted 14 hours in hell and still see them as children instead of weapons. So, stay. Help me learn. Please." The silence stretched. Then Quinn said, "I want the cameras off at night. Permanently. Done. Unlocked doors. At least to their bedroom and bathroom. Done. Family therapy. All of us. You included." Wilson's jaw worked. Then, done. And no more tests. No more nannies quitting or being fired. We figure this out together or not at all. Wilson nodded once. Agreed. Quinns looked at the twins, these two small girls who'd tested her, broken her, and somehow made her want to stay anyway. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll stay." Hour 24. 6:47 p.m. The alarm on Marcus' phone went off in the security office. 24 hours. He stared at the notification, then at the monitors. Most of them were dark now, Wilson's orders. But the common areas still showed feeds. Quinn sat on the floor of the playroom, a board game spread between her and the twins. She was losing badly, judging by Anne's triumphant grin. She'd made it. Marcus picked up his radio. Control to all units. Evaluation period complete. Subject has exceeded baseline threshold. Wilson's voice crackled back immediately. Confirmed. Update her status to active employment. Standard contract. Sir, about the bonus. Process it. Full amount. today. Marcus paused. In 3 years, he'd never heard Wilson sound almost relieved. In the playroom, Quinns moved her game piece and promptly landed on Anne's trap. "Ha!" and crowed. "You lose 10 points and have to go back to start." "This game is rigged," Quinns muttered, but she was smiling. "It's not rigged," Alice said primly. "You're just bad at strategy." "I'm bad at a lot of things, apparently." The twins laughed. Real laughter, not the sharp, performative kind from before. The sound was lighter, easier. 24 hours and 7 minutes. Quinns had survived. But more than that, the twins had survived her staying. The changes started small. That first night after Wilson's surrender, Quinns noticed the camera in her assigned bedroom had a piece of black tape over the lens. Not removed, just blinded. "Daddy did it himself," Alice whispered when she saw Quinns staring at it. "He taped all the bedroom cameras. And the bathrooms were already off, but he added more tape. Just to be sure. He also unlocked our door and added, holding up a key card. See, we can go to the kitchen now. At night, if we're hungry." Small changes. But for children who'd lived in a surveillance state, they were seismic. Dr. Patricia came 3 times that first week. Not to the medical suite. To the living room, where Wilson sat stiffly on one couch, the twins on another, and Quinns in a chair between them like a buffer. "Mr. Wilson," Dr. Patricia said during the second session, "when Anne says she's scared, what do you hear?" Wilson's jaw tightened. "Weakness." "And what does weakness mean to you?" A long pause. "Vulnerability. Something that can be exploited." "And when your daughters show vulnerability, you want to eliminate it," Wilson admitted, his voice rough. "Make them stronger, harder." Anne's face crumpled. Alice looked at her lap. "But what if," Dr. Patricia continued gently, "their vulnerability isn't something to eliminate? What if it's something to protect?" Wilson looked at his daughters, really looked, and something in his face broke. "I don't know how," he whispered. "Then we'll learn together," Dr. Patricia said. The testing didn't stop immediately. 3 days in, and accidentally spilled juice on Quinn's shoes. Watched her reaction carefully. Quinns just sighed. "Guess I needed to mop anyway." 4 days in, Alice screamed for an hour about wanting ice cream for dinner. Quinns let her scream, then quietly made a balanced meal and ate it herself. Eventually, Alice wandered over and stole bites from Quinn's plate. They were still testing, but the tests had changed. Not "will you break" anymore. "Will you stay?" Wilson started coming home earlier. Not every night. Not even most nights at first. But 8 p.m. instead of midnight. Then 7 p.m. Then 6:30. He'd stand in the doorway, watching Quinns read to the twins or help them build elaborate block towers that always collapsed into giggles. "You can join us," Quinns said one evening, not looking up from the book. "I don't want to interrupt. You're their father." "It's not an interruption." Wilson hesitated, then awkwardly sat on the far end of the couch. and immediately scrambled into his lap, surprising everyone, especially him. "Read the dragon part," and demanded, handing him the book. Wilson's hands shook as he took it. I'm not good at voices." "That's okay," Alice said, leaning against his side. "Quinn's isn't either. But we like it anyway." And Heriberto Wilson, the man who'd negotiated million-dollar deals without flinching, read a children's book about dragons with a voice that cracked on every other word. His daughters didn't care. They just smiled. Week 2 brought the first real laugh. Not from the twins. From Wilson. They were having dinner, an actual family dinner, chairs pulled up to the same table, when Alice told a joke she'd learned from Dr. Patricia. Why did the teddy bear say no to dessert? "I don't know," Quinns played along. "Why?" "Because she was stuffed." It was a terrible joke. The kind that made you groan, and burst into laughter. The infectious kind that spreads like wildfire. Quinns started laughing. And then, impossibly, Wilson chuckled. It was brief, almost silent, but it was there. The twins froze, staring at their father like he'd just performed magic. Daddy laughed, and whispered awed. "At my joke," Alice added, her eyes wide. Wilson looked embarrassed. It was moderately amusing. "Say it was funny," Alice demanded, grinning. "It was adequate humor," Wilson said, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Daddy smiled and shrieked. "Quinns, did you see?" He smiled, and suddenly everyone was laughing. Messy, loud, uncontrolled laughter that had nothing to do with jokes and everything to do with release. Release from 3 years of grief. From 17 failed attempts at connection. From the exhausting performance of being stronger than they felt. For 5 minutes they were just a family. Imperfect. Broken. But together. Quinns became invested without meaning to. She started thinking about the twins when she called Tommy at night. Started comparing their healing to her son's needs. Started wondering if maybe she could help both families. Her own and this one. But she stayed wary. Because Wilson was still Wilson. Still had guards. Still conducted business that made the news for all the wrong reasons. Still lived in a world where violence was currency and loyalty was bought. "You're thinking about leaving," Wilson said one night, finding her on the balcony. "How did you know? You get this look. Like you're calculating escape routes." Quinns didn't deny it. "This isn't a normal job." "No. And you're not a normal employer." "No," Wilson agreed. "But the twins are better. You see that?" "I do." Quinns looked at the city. "But better isn't the same as healed. And I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who stayed when everyone else left." Wilson interrupted. "That matters. Does it? Or am I just another employee you've managed to control?" Wilson was quiet for a long moment. "If I wanted to control you, I would have kept the cameras on. Kept the doors locked. Kept paying you enough that you couldn't afford to leave. And yet here I am, making less than I would at most nanny positions, living in a fortress, working for a man whose enemies could. Are threatened, Wilson cut in, his voice hard. Daily. I've increased security, changed protocols. Anyone who even looks at you or the twins wrong. That's exactly what I mean, Quinn said. You're still solving problems with force. I'm solving them with whatever keeps you safe. The possessiveness in his voice made Quinn's stomach flip. Not with fear. With something more complicated. I'm not yours to protect, she said quietly. You're theirs, Wilson countered, nodding toward the window where the twins were visible, playing. Which means you're mine to keep safe. 3 weeks in, Alice got sick. Just a cold. But she clung to Quinn's like a barnacle, feverish and miserable. My mom used to sing, Alice mumbled, when I was sick. But I can't remember the song anymore. Quinn's heart broke a little. Want me to try? Alice nodded. Quinn sang off-key, half-forgotten lullabies her own mother had sung. Alice fell asleep mid-verse, her small hand clutching Quinn's shirt. When Quinns looked up, Wilson was in the doorway, watching, not evaluating, not calculating, just watching, with an expression that looked almost like grief. Week 4, the twins stopped calling her Nanny. It happened naturally. Alice asked for help with a puzzle. Quinns, can you help me with this piece? Not Nanny Quinns. Not Miss Quinns. Just Quinns. And looked up sharply. Then testing. Quinns, do you like mac and cheese? Quinns, Alice repeated, as if savoring the word. Your name is pretty. It's just a name, Quinn said, but her throat was tight. No, and said seriously. Names are important. Nanny is a job. Quinns is you. And in that moment, Quinns realized she'd stopped being an employee. She'd become something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like family. 6 months later. The penthouse had clocks now. Small ones. Tasteful. But present. In the kitchen, the hallway, the playroom. Proof that time was no longer a weapon. Just a measure of hours passing like they did in normal homes. Quinns noticed them every morning, the way you notice scars after they've healed. Reminders of what used to be. She stood at the kitchen counter, preparing breakfast while Anne and Alice argued over what movie to watch later. A normal argument. The kind siblings have when the stakes are low and love is assumed. But we watched your movie last time. Alice protested. Did not. We watched Quinn's choice. That doesn't count. Quinns always picks the boring educational ones. I can hear you, Quinns called, smiling. And documentaries are not boring. They are, both twins chorused, then dissolved into giggles. 6 months ago they would have been screaming, breaking things, testing to see if Quinns would separate them, punish them, leave them. Now they were just children. Wilson appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand. Not at 6 a.m. on his way out. At 7:30, joining them for breakfast before work. Something he'd started doing 3 months ago and hadn't stopped. Daddy. Alice launched herself at him. He caught her with practiced ease now, no longer stiff with surprise. Tell and it's my turn to pick the movie, Alice demanded. Absolutely not, Wilson said, setting her down. I learned months ago never to take sides in your battles. And grinned. Dr. Patricia taught him that. Dr. Patricia teaches me many things I should have learned decades ago, Wilson said dryly, accepting the coffee Quinns handed him. Their fingers brushed. A moment, brief, charged, then gone. The changes had been gradual, almost invisible. Cameras removed entirely from bedrooms and bathrooms. Then from the playroom. Then from everywhere except the elevator and front entrance. Standard security, Marcus had insisted, not surveillance. Locks changed to standard keys. And Alice each had their own, worn on bright lanyards they decorated themselves. The guards had been reduced from 8 to 3, and they'd been instructed by Wilson himself to respond to actual threats, not children's noise. Let them be loud, Wilson had told Marcus one day, his voice tight. Loud means alive. Therapy had become routine. Every Tuesday, family session. Every Thursday, twin session. Every other Friday, Wilson alone with Dr. Patricia, working through decades of inherited trauma he'd never named. He cried last week, and had whispered to Quinns after overhearing. In therapy, we heard him through the door. That's between him and Dr. Patricia, Quinns had said gently. I know. But Daddy never cries. We thought he couldn't. Everyone can. Some people just forget how. Quinn's own life had transformed too. The $60,000 bonus had cleared her debts. The salary, renegotiated after that first brutal 24 hours, allowed her to bring Tommy to the city. He was enrolled in the same private school as the twins now. Wilson's subtle machination to ensure Quinns wouldn't leave. You can't stay for the money, Wilson had said. But you can stay because leaving would uproot your son. That's fair, isn't it? It wasn't manipulation. It was strategy. The kind that benefited everyone. Tommy and the twins had become friends. The easy kind that children form when adults aren't poisoning the well. He'd slept over twice, treating the penthouse like an elaborate playground rather than a fortress. Your boss is weird, Tommy had said once. But nice weird. Not scary weird. He's trying, Quinns had replied. That's what matters. Now, watching Wilson sit at the table with his daughters, laughing at something Alice said, Quinns felt the weight of what they'd built together. Not perfect. Not healed. But healing. And still had nightmares. Alice still tested boundaries. Wilson still struggled with showing affection without awkwardness. But they were trying. And trying was surviving. And surviving eventually became living. After breakfast, Wilson lingered while the twins ran to get dressed. Marcus submitted the quarterly report, he said, not meeting Quinn's eyes. 0 nanny turnovers. 0 emergency interventions. The twins' pediatrician noted significant emotional improvement. They're good kids, Quinn said. They always were. They just needed someone to see them as children instead of problems, Wilson finished. I know. He set down his coffee cup. I was thinking. Dr. Patricia suggested A vacation. As a family. A vacation. Somewhere without guards. Without. He gestured vaguely at the penthouse. Without all this. Just the four of us. And Tommy, if you'd like. Quinns stared at him. 6 months ago, Wilson wouldn't have left this building without a security detail. Now he was proposing vulnerability. You trust that? Being exposed like that. Wilson met her gaze finally. I trust you. And my daughters trust you. That's more important than security. Something shifted in Quinn's chest. Something dangerous and warm. I'll think about it, she said carefully. Wilson nodded, grabbed his briefcase, then paused. Thank you. For what? For staying. When you should have run. He left before she could respond. That afternoon, Quinns found Wilson on the balcony. Not working. Not on the phone. Just standing there watching the city. She joined him in silence. They used to scream every day, Wilson said finally. 4 hours. And I thought it meant I was failing. That they were broken. That I destroyed them like my father destroyed. He stopped. But you taught me they were screaming because they were alive. Because they refused to be silent. They're your daughters, Quinn said. They inherited your strength. They just didn't inherit your methods. Wilson was quiet for a long moment. Then, I spent 3 years trying to control everything. The environment. The schedule. The people around them. I hired 17 women and broke every one of them because I thought breaking them proved my daughters needed more. Stronger. Harder. He turned to face Quinns. You lasted 14 hours before calling me a coward. And you were right. I didn't say. You didn't have to. Wilson's voice was rough. You showed me that power, real power, isn't making people fear you. It's making them trust you enough to be weak around you. Inside, through the windows, Anne and Alice were building something elaborate with blocks. Not destroying. Creating. Laughing when it collapsed. Building again. Wilson watched them, and Quinns watched him watching them. Saw the grief in his face. Grief for the time he'd wasted, the connection he'd nearly lost. But also something else. Pride. Love. Hope. Power buys silence, Wilson said quietly, almost to himself. I learned that from my father. Built an empire on it. Thought I could parent the same way. He looked at Quinns. But you taught me something he never did. Something Elena tried to tell me before she died. What's that? Wilson's eyes returned to his daughters. His brilliant, traumatized, healing daughters, and his voice broke just slightly. Love teaches children to live. Inside the penthouse and called out, Quinns, Daddy, come see what we built. Not a demand. Not a test. An invitation. Quinns and Wilson exchanged a glance. Then, together they walked back inside. Back to the twins who were still learning to trust that adults would stay. Back to the home that was slowly transforming from a fortress into a place where vulnerability was protected instead of punished. Back to the messy, imperfect, beautiful work of teaching broken people, children and adults alike, that survival was just the beginning. That what came after survival was the hardest part. Learning to live. Months later, when people asked Quinns how she'd lasted where 17 others failed, she never mentioned the money or the determination or even the desperation that drove her to that penthouse door. She talked about 2 small girls who'd been taught silence earned love. About a father who'd confused control with protection. About the difference between breaking and healing, between surviving and living. And about how sometimes the strongest thing you could do wasn't to build walls. It was to tear them down, even when it terrified you. Especially then. The penthouse had photographs now. Not professional ones. Messy ones. And Alice covered in paint. Wilson smiling, actually smiling, at Tommy's birthday party. Quinns asleep on the couch with all 3 children piled on top of her. Proof that people had lived here, laughed here, healed here. Proof that 17 failures had led to 1 impossible success. Not because Quinns was stronger than the others, but because she'd been brave enough to admit she was weak. And in that weakness, found the strength they all needed. Power buys silence. But love. Love teaches children, and broken fathers and desperate mothers, to live. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be dropping another unforgettable story tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.